Great. So let's add our next speaker. Hello, Dmitry. Dmitry's muted. It happens with like every other speaker. Someone comes on and they're muted.
Sorry for that. Yeah, looks like a tradition already. So, hi Trisha, hi everyone. Thanks for staying with us for the last talk of Friday. Probably it's not that easy, but thank you for that.
I'm really excited to have you here, actually. So Dmitry's going to talk about version control in an IDE, like you can see on the screen. I just wanted to say, like, I really love the version control, specifically Git in IntelliJ IDEA, because I am not a command line person. I am a visual person, and having the version control stuff exposed to me inside my IDE has actually helped me to learn Git when I didn't know it before. So I just want to say thank you, Dmitry, for like everything you do, because it's amazing.
Thank you for your kind words, and you're welcome. We do strive to make experience as smooth as it can. Of course, there are a lot of room to improve, but we are doing our best. And basically, that's what is something I would like to speak about today. Yeah, so
I will let you get on with it.
Thank you. Okay, so for the last talk of the day, probably it would be much funnier if it was some demo showing cool features or whatever. Unfortunately, my talk would be a bit different. Of course, I will go through some features we have, but the idea I have is mainly to discuss what it means to build a version control and what challenges we have. And at the end, I will probably reveal some further plans for this. So stay tuned. Okay, so a bit about me. My name is Dmitry. I joined JetBrains in 2016 as a support engineer for version control, and was working in that role for some time, gaining experience and understanding of how people use our version controls, and not only ours, but in general, what issues they have. And recently, I have switched to a product management role, so now I'm working as a product manager in IntelliJ product management team. So my main focus, of course, is still version control. So hopefully the changes we introduced recently were to the best of all of you. Of course, I understand that some changes, because they touched UI, they might not be as pleasant as they should be, but we sure this all for good. And this was something I would talk about later. Again, we're talking about version control in general here, but of course there are others except Git. Git is the industry standard de facto now. So basically, what I'm talking about having Git in mind. Git is very flexible. There are different workflows. A lot of people have different preferences how they could use this. This means that whatever we do in IDE is not universal and it will not fit everyone, and we do this and do understand this. So what I'm talking about is a point of view, and it's okay if you disagree. And if you do disagree, please don't hesitate to tell us. You can basically contact our support. You can use Twitter. You can use feedback in the IDE, whatever. Be sure we read every feedback we get. So if you have something to say, do this. And in my talk, I will basically cover three parts. First of all, a bit of the current state and how IDE could be helpful. What challenges we do have, and we did, maybe we tried resolving some time ago. And as I said, what would be the focus for future? Let's start with a bit of history. We are all here today because IntelliJ turned 20. It's a great date, but it basically means that there are a lot of, let's call it legacy, but it's not necessarily bad part. There are like version control was a part of the product for a very long time, and IntelliJ has support for very different version control systems, starting from like CVS, clear case, whatever, and all version controls that basically was ever supported has left some mark in how it was designed. The thing is that through this 20 years, the version control changed a lot. So does change its workflows, so the demand for new features and new UI. But still, we have some UI that was designed long ago and is still in the product, and we still have some habits from back there. It's good from some point because all users who are long with us, they keep everything, so they just are used to that, and it's comfortable for them. We try not to break any stuff without any real need for that. And just a quick recap for what version controls we have support for. So currently we have, of course, Git, we have Subversion, we have Perforce and Mercurial. This all is basically not supported in Ultimate out of the box. But there were lots of others, and they all basically touched the concepts and the IDE. Basically tried to be consistent through all these version controls. Maybe it's not always the right thing, and Git has its own concepts, is unique in some ways. For example, of course, the staging area. And recently, we of course are focusing on Git, and here is like a list of features that we just recently implemented. And I just want to show you that we are working on making Git experience as pleasant as it could. So yeah, we did implement the staging area support. It's not the default. If you're not using it now, you are welcome to go to settings and enable it and give it a try and let us know what you think. We implemented Git commit templates features. We reworked a bit the log view to show all the branches in there to make it comfortable to work with the repository. We invested a lot into GitHub pull requests. We reworked some dialects to be more Gitish and easier for Git users to understand, so on, so on. There are a lot of small things we are doing. And basically, hopefully, hopefully these changes are really helpful. But even without those changes, IntelliJ IDE has a pretty powerful version control already, and as Teresa said, it basically is all inside at your hands. And I would like to speak about this a bit, how IDE would be helpful for you if you want to do your version control tasks from IDE. Again, workflows can be different, and IDE might not support all of them, but the good thing here is that it can be customized. We rely on the command line Git. It means that as Git is flexible, you can go to its config and do everything almost everything you want right there. So in most cases, IntelliJ will just pick it up and work with this. So if your workflow needs some customizations, just go to Git config and do tell Git to behave like you want, and the IDE would do that as well. Also, there are a bunch of plugins that can bring you missing functionality. So if you want some feature that is not there, go check out plugins that could be really helpful for your productivity. So now, what is the version control, and basically what can IDE do? So I would say that version control includes several aspects. First of all, it's a backup for your code, so a way when you can save something. It's, of course, history of the development. It's source of truth. So once you put something in a master branch or main branch or development or whatever is used in your branching model, then basically it goes to the application. So it's source of truth, and we need to make sure that version control has everything in right. And of course, it's a tool for collaboration, to share code, to review code, to work on features in a team. So let's drill down a bit. So a backup aspect of version control. So there are several approaches. So you can do really small version work in progress commits, and it would be great if IDE could help you here. And I think IDE does help here because it's easier with the commit tool window. Just make quick work in progress commits. You can just open it, specify the commit message. That's it. You don't need to spin up any additional processes, huge windows, dialog, switch, context, or whatever. You can shelf stash your changes right from the IDE. So it has shelf tab. it does have support for stash, and we are going to. So stash currently is like an old dialog, separate dialog, but we are going to basically make it a similar tab as a shelf. And of course, local history. What's local history? It's basically auto commits. So you just do edits, and IDE saves some states. And if for some reasons you have not committed, you have reverted your local changes, you made a lot of undos or whatever, you can just go there, browse what has been changed, and get the changes you did out of local history. It's a great tool. If you don't know about this, now you should. It's a great tool that can help you get from some situations when you could lose code. So if for some reason something happened and the version of a file in the working tree lost the changes, local history is to the rescue. So the history part of the version control is basically, I believe, where IDE could just literally shine. Why? Because we have basically great diffs, and history is about to find out what changes were made, and diff is essential part to understand what was the change. I believe we have a great diff tool, and also I believe we have a great ways to call this diff. What I mean, we have a great log, which shows all the history of your project right in the place. You have all the commits, you have branches list, you have changes browser on the right showing contents of all that commits. You can select several commits, compare them with each other. You can select branches on the left and compare it with each other, or compare everything with local state. It's really, really handy to browse through the history, but it basically could be too much. And to help with reducing the scope, we could show history of individual files and individual folders in a similar way, where we have the commit history graph with all the list of commits. We have some preview diff on the right. And so basically, we have an option to show this history of particular file throughout the entire branches. Again, you can select any commit in the list and compare it to another one. It's very, very handy. Update info, if you got some updates, IDE would show you a similar view showing the list of commits that have arrived during the last fetch. And again, it is useful to review what has been downloaded. Again, history is about finding who did the change and what is annotate feature. Annotate feature, also known as git blame. It can be easily opened up in an editor with like right-click on the gutter. And from there, again, you can navigate history from the annotate. You see the author. You can basically find out who to ask about something. You could see the commit messages and so on. And the great thing is history for selection. Probably not all users know it. You can basically select any random text in an editor and go through its context menu, git, and show history for selection. And it would show you a dialog listing commits that touch exactly that part. So you can highlight a method, and then IDE would automatically show history of the specific method. You can just call it for a random selection. You can call it for a class or whatever. So it's a really, really great thing to find out what has happened, especially if some strings were removed, which is not listed in the annotations usually. And of course, you need to know why was the change. And to understand why, you can, of course, go find ask colleague. But it would be great if the colleague wrote a great commit message when doing something. So making good commit message is a great, let's say, skill. And IDE could help here. And how? Basically, we recently introduced the commit template support, as I mentioned. It would be available in 21.1. Also, we have a long-standing feature with commit message inspections, which you configure in settings and make IDE to verify your commit message basically complies with some rules. Another point is collaboration. So collaboration in terms of version control is basically reviewing the code. So submitting pull requests and reviewing them. So we basically introduced a lot And especially in the times of pandemic and also remote work, it becomes more and more important to support this. Also, collaboration means that you should be able to easily share your work with your colleagues. So for this, IDE has a good push dialog, which gives you an overview of what you're going to push and where. It basically allows you to create pull requests. Again, with the new release, the UI is uplifted to be more comfortable to use and allow more features. So check it out. You should be able to share your project to GitHub or Space or whatever other service you are using. And it should be easy to discuss your changes. Again, this means that you have all the review tools right inside your IDE. And we do have this for GitHub. And with this release, we will also have it for Space, so that you will be able to browse all their reviews and use the timeline, use the diffs, navigate diffs, leave the comments right from diffs, whatever. And IDE, version control is a source of truth. So IDE should help you to make sure that commits that you publish, and in terms of Git is basically pushing to some specific branch, I believe, are of the good quality. So for this, we have several pre-commit checks that basically verifies your work when you commit. We have, again, the push dialog that allows you to review everything and make sure there are no typos in messages, all the contents are right, whatever. It shows pretty the same view as the log. It has a graph, it has a change browser, it has commit details, everything right into your place. So we have some protected branch rules similar to GitHub, and basically they're synced from GitHub. So if some branch is prohibited, so protected branch is basically the branch you can't force push to, and it basically means that you should not be able to, you should not rebase it because you will not be able to force push. And the IDE takes care of this. And if some branch is in a protected list, IDE would not allow you several operations with that. We have commit message inspections to make sure that commit message is good enough. We have commit template for the same purposes. Yeah, here it is. Here how it looks like. So IDE would basically automatically populate it if it is specified in the settings. So let's just do a quick recap of this section. So there are already a lot of course, I didn't mention all the features we have. There are a lot of them, minor ones, bigger ones. Some might be useful for you, some might not. But still, there are tons of them. If you have some idea, if you have some popular operation you tend to do from command line and you are not comfortable with this, check out the capabilities. There are already a lot of features IDE provides that could help you to be productive and do your tasks faster. I believe the IDE is the best place to work with the code because it's aware of the code and to see diffs. So you can use it. If you are not comfortable with this as a version control client, you can configure it as a Git diff tool. So why not? You have a local history that basically is your backup plan. So if something goes wrong, check out the local history. They should be able to help you a lot with this. But building these features, we of course face a lot of challenges, and as developers, and we as a product team. So IDE is primarily about being productive, and if you have missed that, check out the dedicated talk about this Dmitry made today earlier. Version control basically is just, in this regards, just some other feature of any other. So it basically follows the same rules. So being productive with version control means do version control tasks with the least effort. And under least effort, I mean reducing number of operations if you have some routines. So basically automate routine. We should reduce context switching, as this means provide everything within the IDE without need for users to go to other tools or whatever. We need to make everything clear so that users do not need to think what to do, to save their mental effort to think of their code. IDE should provide assistance with complex and not very complex tasks right in place when it is needed and not distract. And of course, IDE should not get into the way if you are doing something. So again, let's take a bit closer look at every of these. So under reducing number of operations, I mean that we should provide some ways to do several steps as a one. And we do provide them. And of course, there are a lot of places when this can be done, but we already have something. A good example for this could be update project. This basically does the same as pull, but for all the repositories in the project, and you don't need to do anything. It can just be called with a single shortcut. Another good example of such action would be the checkout with Rebase. It saves you additional checkout and indexing. Or a good action we implemented recently is like a checkout for remote branches. So unless instead of putting you into the detached head as like regular checkout would, our action would basically create a local branch pointing to that remote, so you can work with this easily, and it will take care of all the conflicts that could possibly arise. Basically prompting you to resolve them if really needed, or just fast forwarding branch or whatever. And there are a lot of such minor things, and again, it would all depend on the workflow, which actions would be helpful. Also, there are some plugins that could help with the same. So that's great that we have them, and it's a good thing. It's basically a must to have them, but unfortunately, as any good thing, it also has a drawback. We could not invent. We cannot fill the IDE, the entire IDE, with like only these smart actions, because basically they could be unique to the IDE, and users would not understand basically what they do because it's too complex, and maybe because other tooling does something different way, and they're not basically used to that. So such actions are not clear, and the IDE needs to explain. And we to try to make things clear, we have like some, of course, documentations. We basically put a lot of effort in naming actions correctly, at least as we could, as correct as we could, and so on. Another thing that could help with the routine is basically doing something automatically in the background or whatever. For example, IDE checks for incoming commits and does it on background and show you some markers on the branches pop up if there are. Another way, maybe extension of this, would be to do automatic fetch, which IDE does not do currently, but there are plugins for it if you do want. There are some like email requests to do some automatic mergers from time to time, and so on. But of course, we just cannot simply do this because of several reasons, and one of the drawbacks would be that doing some automatic process, starting it in the background, like it could interfere with your working. So if IDE starts some process right in the middle of your coding session, it could show you some dialogue, some prompts, it distracts. It's not something we actually want from an IDE. IDE should help and not distract you from your work. So, for example, for the incoming commits, we implement a special logic that suppresses call or prompts for credentials. So if we need credentials for this operation, basically we either have them already saved, or feature just gets disabled. And also doing unexpected action, especially those that could alter your working tree, is not something one expects from the IDE, I believe. So we should be very careful with doing this, and if IDE does something in the background, we need to make sure it is safe. Reducing context switching means that we should have everything right inside the IDE. And under everything, I mean that not every single command should have an alias in the UI. I mean that you should be able to do your tasks, that you should be able to resolve all the use cases you need right from the IDE. Of course, there are some tasks that are really rare, and basically it's okay to call some third-party tooling to do that, or like go to the command line to do that. But if you do something regularly, of course, it should be inside the IDE. So a great example of such in-place operations would be like gutter pop-up. You type in your editor, you have the highlights, you can basically do reverted diff special, and since staging is introduced, you can stage right from there. Another, I would say, good example of such in-place operations is like git tool window. What I mean here is that basically git tool window shows you all the changes in your project, and right here it shows you the commit controls. So you can commit quickly right from the place without the need to go elsewhere. Or maybe edit history operations in the log. So of course there is rebase, and we have a great interactive rebase dialog, I would say. But still, you have to call the dialog, and sometimes it's just more handier to just call something from the context of the explicit commit and do not go to any additional dialogs. And there are numerous places we could do that, numerous things we could add. But again, it is not something we should do probably, because it would clutter the UI, it would make the IDE overwhelming, it would increase cognitive load. So, for example, yeah, what a mess. I don't think that it is something you would like to see and work with every day and would expect some cleaner UI. So when doing something, when adding a feature, we basically need to think, and we do think how to make them more context specific, do not expose it in everywhere, and just to reduce cognitive load so it does not stay in front of you. Save mental effort means that IDE should do as much as it could to just work. For example, and one of the way to achieve this is to set proper defaults. So when doing something, you should select all the options in the way that the command succeeds in as much scenarios as it could. For example, a good example for this would be overriding credential helper in Git, which we did for GitHub first, because otherwise IDE does not have any controls over authentication in Git. And we could not deliver the best experience for our users in that terms. So overriding that for the commands called from the IDE was a good go. Another part of this, of course, is clear error messages, so that user does not need to think what that message means and what he could do and stuff like that. So yeah, first of all, of course, it means that IDE should parse errors and show only part of this. For example, like here, it says that basically the push was rejected and offers to show the full details in the console. Instead, we could basically put everything in that small, tiny notifications and make it unreadable, but I don't think it's something that should basically do. A better way here in this specific example would be basically to offer additional actions right in place to solve this, because it's something easier. But for complex tasks, when IDE could not automatically solve something, it is a good way to make it clearer. Add helper actions to fix errors. That was actually what I was just talking about. So if you have some errors and you have a clue how it could be, I mean, you as an IDE, you should be doing this. In some cases, even it could be done in the background. So if some operations is attempted and it fails, and you know possible reasons for that, you can attempt it one more time with some steps to resolve. And if it works, that's great. From the user perspective, it just worked, and it's a great experience. Installing Git, for example, context action. If we, for example, could not find Git, we offer to download and install it. Basically, we tried doing that in the background, but going to the internet without some explicit actions is not probably something you would like to do. So in this case, we have to limit it to an action. Oh, it's like setting up stream when Git fetch fails. That's the same thing. And again, best UI is no UI. So we should invest as much features as much effort to make our features just work without the user interaction at all, if it is possible. For example, yeah, a good example here again. Some time ago, IDE had user to choose the Git executable manually, and then we introduced automatic detection. Or maybe another good example is submodel support for Git. Did you know IDEA supports submodels? And basically it does so if you have, what I mean under support is if your project has submodels, it will just work as any other project. So, but there under the hood, there are specific things done to make it work. And one more aspect of mental effort is that we need to increase discoverability of some features, making them available in contexts that could basically help you doing your stuff more productively. And part of this, like assistance when needed, so this exactly is a part of the discoverability. For example, when we currently have encounter any conflicts in Git, IDE shows you the corresponding dialogue that helps you solving them. And inside the dialog, we have like magic ones that can help you solving the simple conflicts. And this basically all in the context. So you just invoke the operation and you know where it comes from, why, what to do. And once you're finished, basically IDE does everything else and finishes the operation. Another example would be like if your push gets rejected, you just need to auto-update. And IDE offers that. Or maybe if some of you have encountered, if you're setting up a new project and Git for some reasons is not configured and has no username in its config, IDE would show you a dialog asking it, but it would show you it only when you try to commit and not at any other time. So only when the username is really needed, IDE would prompt it for you for it. And the really important part of an IDE is not to get in the way. That means that we do not need any confirmations, special model confirmations, if they can be avoided. For example, you can drop a commit from log right now. So you can right-click a commit and select drop even accidentally, and it will just go. With Git, it's completely safe. Commit is not actually lost. And we have undo right there, right in the event log. So if it was an accidental thing, you can just undo, and it's much easier, and it's basically, I think, perceived like when you don't need to confirm your choices. First of all, you do not get a habit to agree to every prompt. And on the other hand, it feels like much easier. If we are working from the IDE with Git repository, IDE should not lock repository when possible, so that you can use any other tooling and don't have any issues. If IDE needs to prompt you something, it would be better to avoid model lags. Of course, yeah, sometimes there are cases when some input is immediately required, and this is the use case for showing the model. But in a lot of cases, when let's say several years ago showing a model was okay and widely accepted, nowadays the UIs are quite different, and models are not necessarily a good thing. So doing everything, all of this stuff has the following changes. Yeah, we need to resolve all these specific things. And having in mind that all the VCSs we support, we have specific changes, have their like unique, let's say, workflows, unique concepts. And in terms of Git, first of all, talking about stage, IntelliJ did not have support for stage for a rather long time because we had a pretty comfortable way to commit through change lists. It is a good feature. It allows you different stuff like working on several features simultaneously and like keeping them separate and committing. But Git concept is different, and a lot of people are used to that. So of course, we need to have it in mind. This is why we basically introduce the stage support. But still, we cannot provide a solution for every and each situation, and we have to pick something that we believe most users do, and we have to pick defaults carefully. Especially, we have to do this because there are various requests out there, and some demands contradict each other. For example, your commit workflow. One user might consider commit like as it used to be like a publishing somewhere, when it's like, which is the case for centralized version control systems. Others are used to Git style, and commit is something really, really easy. And for one of them, keeping the dialog opened after the commit is not something you would like to do because commit is finished and that's it. Others might want the commit interface to stay because they would like to do series of small commits and so on. As of course, this contradicts each other, and we cannot make UI that would fit both at the same time. Of course, we could add various options, but basically going with thousands of options is also not something that the product needs, because again, it becomes overwhelming, and it contradicts the goal of saving mental energy. Another thing that is challenging, especially in IDEA, is that it's a 20 years old product. It has a lot of users that are with us for a very long time. They are used to that. They have their habits. They know shortcuts. And basically touching even a small part without maintaining the compatibility in some way, or maybe providing a way to roll back if it is a really, really major change, it's basically, it's hard to change UI in such a project. And even if we are sure that it's for good, we do understand that it breaks a lot of habits, and we're usually making a lot of effort, putting a lot of effort to at least keep shortcuts working and workflows looking the same. And talking about some smart actions, smartness produces too many unclarity, might produce. And as I mentioned, users might not trust the tool because of that. A lot of users just prefer simple but clear commands, simple but clear actions to solve their tasks. And discoverability of all the features we have is also a major challenge, and we cannot put all of them right in front of the users, or like advertise them all with some banners. Again, this is not something we would our users experience. So the goal of the team when making a great UI for an IDE is, I believe, first of all, making as much things just work with additional efforts. But at the same time, keep it as clear as possible and provide as much context and as much help as it is possible. And as a product management team, we need to find out the right amount of features we add, the right amount of features we removed, because of course, over the years, there are some features that were used previously and are not used anymore. And we have to remove something. And this is some challenge for the product management team. And also we need to make sure that IDE helps, but helps only when it is needed, and not trying to be too proactive. So that was it for the challenges. And let me, while I have some time, let me speak a bit about how we see the future of version control in an IDE. So first of all, as I mentioned, the primary focus and the thing that basically gets more and more importance nowadays is collaborative work. Various collaborations. And of course, as I said, from the version control point of view, collaborations, first of all, means code reviews. So we would be investing in this a lot. Making PRs from the IDE. Reviewing the code from the IDE. For this, for reviews, currently one has to fetch and probably check out something. So it would be great if it would also could just be on the server side. There are a lot of things that could be improved here. Like currently, in the near future, like we are focusing on supporting existing scenarios and maybe adding some more features later to this. So the idea is that you work with code entirely within the IDE without basically going to other third-party services. Another part is basically we have just recently introduced Space, released Space. So Space is a great collaboration tool, and of course it needs to have, and it already has, great integration with IDE. So the plugin is there, and we plan to invest a lot into collaboration through Space, and not necessarily only reviews, but maybe even communication with colleagues right from the IDE some way. And another collaborating tool that was also mentioned today is, of course, Code with Me. It's not a part of the VCS, but VCS, again, is involved somehow. So I couldn't just not mention this. So Code with Me is also a great collaboration tool, and it would be integrated somehow with version control. For example, like a simple idea of, like, out of the top of my head is like, so you could invite a user to a Code with Me session right from the annotations. So you see that some user changed the code and you don't understand why, and you can right from there invite him to the collaboration session and to discuss and fix. For code reviews, we already have for GitHub and Space. We will be looking into adding support for other platforms like GitLab, Bitbucket, maybe something else in future. One more thing that IDE could really do for code reviews is like when there are complex changes, including a lot of files, mixing style changes, white space changes, with like cleanups and whatever, with some real more important changes. It is sometimes really hard to get an understanding of where we are and how to review that and to get an entry point. So we will explore ways of making the diff views like individual file diffs, or maybe the entire commit diffs view, more semantic aware, so that we can filter out unnecessary changes. So we can find out the entry point where, like, for example, some interface was added, and then only after you see that interface was added, you can investigate its implementations or whatever. So we would be working in a direction to make the diff smart and helpful in filtering out the changes. Basically, already in the changes view of IntelliJ, there is a filter that, so if in a log you select some commit, there is, in the toolbar of the changes browser, there is a filter that allows you to ignore white space changes right in there in the changes browser. So it's a small example of what can be done. Of course, it could be much more. If you open, for example, the diff and a method was moved, currently it would be just deleted and added, but IDE could show that it was moved and tell you from where. And another one, in terms of code review, another thing that could help with the productivity and the way we are reviewing is to make reviews to be the same as working with the local code. So currently you are reviewing in diffs, but probably if you, so you can basically already check out some branch and see what was the diffs and work it with locally. But if we can do the same without the need to check out with some additional helps and controls for review right in the editor, it could be a good help. So we will be looking into this direction. And to help with saving mental capacity and reducing cognitive load, we will be working on consolidating features. What I mean under this is that all the actions and UIs, all the concepts in the IDE should work in a similar way. So it is clear and intuitive. If you do some actions you are used to something similar, it would produce the similar results. So it is clear. We would reduce the amount of different concepts. For example, we have like several places to look at branches. probably it could be unified. Or we have several diffs like diff in editor, diff in a frame, some other diffs. They could be unified, of course, in a way to keep the habit. So if you do prefer, for example, diff in a frame, you could drag out the tab from editor and have it in a frame on a permanent basis. So something like that, but so that any diff is like other diffs. So there are not separate diffs that behaves in a different way. And of course, we would look for all possible ways to reduce cognitive load, maybe remove something, maybe move some actions to better locations, so ever. We would look into additional popular workflows that are not covered yet and that support for them. We would look into multiple repository setup. What I mean here, of course, we do have such support already, but they were built with an idea that all those repositories are part of the same project. So in other words, it's like a single repository cut into several. We would be looking into scenarios when the current approach does not work very well, and we can improve this. And yeah, we will be trying to make idea not to get in the way. And the best example and what we would do in the near future is a non-model merge. It's basically almost there with the introduction of stage, so stay tuned. So a quick recap, takeaways from my talk today. So IDE already has a lot of features. So doing some stuff inside it could really help with your productivity. So if you are not doing VCS in the IDE, try, it could help, it could work for you. If there is something missing, do not hesitate to configure it and install plugins to make you more productive. Next focus of the IDE and all the tooling, I believe, in the near future is collaboration. And be sure that we are actively working to get us all in that bright future of best user experience. Thank you all for staying with me today. So if you have some questions, I believe we have several minutes for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. I was particularly interested in, and this is questions I had for you before I saw the talk, about that balance between how do you expose the features of the version control system versus kind of like trying to abstract that away. So I think you did a really good job of showing that tension between providing those features or getting the IDE to do stuff for you, or wrapping up features into multiple things. So that was really cool. I liked that. We do have a bunch of questions. Not surprisingly, there are questions around when is GitLab support going to be the same as the GitHub support, and is there a goal in that direction?
I mentioned that we will be looking in that direction. I cannot promise you any ETA for that, but we definitely do recognize that GitLab is a popular thing. And of course, it needs equal support. I would mention there are some plugins already, third-party plugins, but they could make your life easier. But it would be great, of course, if we have the same review experience with GitLab as with GitHub. So we do have this in mind, but I cannot give you any ETA for that.
But it is on the it's in we are aware of it, is what you're saying. Cool. Oh yeah, well I guess this is kind of related, and Bitbucket as well, support for Bitbucket as well.
Well, it would be great and easy if all the platforms have the same API, so we can just point. Unfortunately, it's not the case. Yes, Bitbucket is also a major thing. I would say that in my understanding, GitLab is quite more popular nowadays, so probably GitLab should go first. But what we are doing now, basically, we are making an API for review frameworks so that all review tooling can get the same controls, the same look, with some difference in the background. So once it is done, and it is basically done as part of introducing space reviews, so unifying space and GitHub experience requires this API. So this is work in progress. And once it is done, I believe we would be looking into adding additional. And because we would have this API, adding additional platforms would be much easier. So probably if and when we release GitHub, Bitbucket would be next and pretty shortly.
That's good to know. Okay. Here's another question. When can we expect the diff viewer to contain the file/folder tree on the left-hand side? There's a long-standing ticket for that, apparently.
Not sure So talking about diffs, as I mentioned, we are going to unify diff experience in the upcoming releases. So probably when the 21.2. So we would be working to make diffs calls from anywhere exactly the same, and probably that would solve that. I'm not sure exactly what ticket is mentioned, but of course, when reworking diffs, we would try to resolve existing issues.
Okay, GitLab support. Oh yes. So this didn't come up on the channel today, but it's something I get asked a lot as a developer advocate. A lot of people ask me, are we ever going to make our version control support as a separate standalone client?
I was expecting this question. It's a tough one, you know. On the one hand, how would it be different from like a lightweight version of an IDE with a bunch of plugins disabled? And currently, it is not exactly clear what is expected from that standalone tooling. On the other hand, there are definitely use cases when users of our IDEs are working with something that, for example, like MathCat or whatever, which is not currently a part of the offering of IntelliJ, but they would like to have the same experience, and adding such a client is kind of logical. We do have some thoughts around this. Again, I cannot promise anything, but we do see that there are like interests in this. There is interest in this, and the people keep voting. So it's quite it could happen. It could happen.
So maybe in the future.
Of course, I do not get it like a promise to deliver one.
It's what is it? Whenever I go to a Java conference, the Oracle guys always put up a slide at the front going, "We don't promise anything. We're not sure what time we're going to do anything." It's the same thing. Yes, it'd be a nice idea. We might get to it at some point.
To be honest, there were some discussions around that, and it could get some traction.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the appeal for it. So I used to use a separate standalone tool for Git, but now I use, as like most people, I just use IntelliJ IDEA for all of that stuff. But I can definitely see the appeal if they're, like you're saying, if people are using a project which is not an IntelliJ IDEA project. It'd be interesting.
Yeah, the issue with that standalone tool would be that, as I said, we tend to reduce context switching, and having a tool basically makes you to switch context. And the question is, what is your use case for that? There are some valid scenarios, and basically, if you would like to somehow substitute the built-in integration with that tool, I see no point for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you very much. It was really, really helpful and really interesting as per usual. Thank you so much, Dmitry.
Thank you too. Thank everyone who stayed here until this time. Thank you, our hosts, and have a great Friday. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye.